All right, I have 6 o'clock. I will be calling the village board meeting of February 22nd to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Kettlebaiter?
Here.
Trustee Brocious?
Here.
Trustee Paul Mikowski?
Here.
Trustee Thuzius?
Here.
Trustee Francois?
Here.
Trustee Zander?
Here.
President Langfeld?
Here. We'll stand for pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're at public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the village board on any issue. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. While the village board encourages input from residents, it may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noted on the agenda. What do we have, Bill?
I did not have anyone pre-register for public comment. I do see a number of participants entering as we speak right now, but otherwise we do not have anyone.
Okay, anybody here? All right. We will move on to the consent agenda. Upon request of any trustee, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for separation, consideration on the general business.
I make a motion to approve.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. So moved. Go to report of village officers, village president. I have nothing. It's not on the agenda. To vice president, Judy.
I only had the chamber has been meeting almost every other week lately, trying to figure out what we're all going to end up doing, and we're talking about Memorial Day to see if there's anything we can do. We're not sure yet, a lot of it's up in the air, and Bill joined us last week for a little bit, so we'll have another one.
Right, you're on now.
Oh, shoot.
That's all right, that's all right, that's all right. Any other reports from trustees?
I would like to make a report for Parks and Rec. We're going to be holding a Bear Park visioning session for the new playground over by the Viridian and Glacier Creek area. And also Mike has and his staff have the spring and summer activity guide coming out March 22nd. And they've just done a lot to accommodate COVID and offer as much, if not more, as they were able to do last summer for sure.
Thank you very much. Village administrator, Bill?
Yes, two things to report here. First, in regards to the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, we're a stakeholder in the Green Infrastructure Project. CARPC has received a $240,000 grant from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a modeling effort of the Black Earth Creek watershed. So that is ongoing. And CARPC has also received a $150,000 planning grant from Wisconsin Emergency Management. Currently there is a request for proposal out there for engineering services. That concludes here at the end of the month, and then we'll partake in choosing an engineering service to move forward in that project. That's all for me.
You didn't want to cover the gateway?
Oh, excuse me.
No,
The gateway for the Driftless area, we sit on that board as a community stakeholder. The gateway to the Driftless area and PW Extension has recently finished an economic feasibility study. And so they are currently working through the release of that study and hope to have some roundtables here in the upcoming month until March. So more to come on that. It does look like a regional trail is feasible. for the communities along that section and Black Earth Creek, all the way up to Reedsburg and through Devil's Lake. And so it'll be interesting to see what we can do with the report in future development here in the village.
All right, thank you. Any other reports from staff today?
I did not have anyone sign up, but we do have various staff members here with us.
Yep, no, I see that, I know. All right, we will go to general business. The first one is discussion and possible action regarding H.M. Zander Conservancy Park Pavilion feasibility study. Mike, are you leading this or who's leading it?
I don't know if you're. All right, so welcome. Andy Meisman and Parker Just are with us tonight from Snyder and Associates to give the village board an overview on their findings and what they have found in regards to a feasibility study for an open air shelter in H.M. Zander Community Nature Park. Within this, there'll be I see you'll see maps, you'll see different graphs of things. They have given this report to the Parks, Recreation, and Conservancy Committee, and the Lions Club has also been included to hear this report already. So if Andy and or Parker, if Andy's, is he on there, Bill?
Yeah, we have both Andy and Parker. Andy, as you can see, I do have your slide pulled up on the.
Okay.
So just let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Perfect. You can go to the next one right now. Excellent. So as Mike said, my name's Andy Meisman, and with me tonight is Parker Just. We're both from Snyder and Associates. Just a quick overview, Snyder and Associates works on a variety of projects, everything from water, transportation, land development, public spaces, municipal engineering services, and structural design as well. Our project team is highlighted here, myself, Scott Anderson, Brian, and Parker. Go to the next slide. So really, we're here to provide engineering and design services to properly plan for the design and construction of the open air shelter in H.M. Zander Community Nature Park. And the process is pretty straightforward. Phase one would include a schematic and concept design of the site and the shelter. And what that includes is a site inventory, so a site visit, a topographic survey, and a geotechnical report. And these red bullets are what we'll be kind of talking tonight in a little bit more detail. In H&H modeling, which is the study of the water on the site, the schematic design to ensure the code compliancy, and kind of where we're at today is the concept development plan and starting to gather some cost estimates. The second portion of this project would be the phase two, which would be the construction documentation and the drawings and final permitting and issuing of bids and cost estimates. And really our goal here is pretty straightforward. We want to work with the village across Plains and all the stakeholders involved to create built work that reflects the community and also adds value to the park. Go to the next slide. So in order to get to those construction documents and built work, we kind of have to look ahead a little bit in phase one to schematic design, and which is really to ensure code compliancy. And really what this breaks down to is looking at the general standards that are applicable to all floodplain districts within the village code. And I'll just read these bullet points here. They state that the village shall review all permit applications, determine whether a proposed building site will be reasonably safe from flooding. All buildings are to be designed and adequately anchored to prevent flotation, collapse, or lateral movement of the structure from any water moving across the site. And development, so in this case, shelter, shall not obstruct flow or increase the regional flood height due to the loss of storage, which would be the pervious land below the shelter. And really what this breaks down to is to issue a land use permit, a H&H modeling study must be completed. And the zoning administrator can deny permits if these above items are not met or adequately studied. You can go to the next slide. So just to take a step back in terms of that site inventory of phase one, we did a site visit, we looked at the topography and did a geotechnical report, but we also just looked at the broad picture of where this shelter needs to be placed and kind of settled on the central portion of the park. Go to the next slide. Also looked at pedestrian connections into the park and typical walking times to make sure we're spreading out the access in a way that made sense, and also looking at the existing parking lots and how that site circulation flowed to the proposed shelter location. You can go to the next slide. And settling on this spot here, just south of Main Street at Mill Creek Parkway, it's a little bit more complex than it might look if you just walk out there. There's a lot of features going on in terms of proper way to just site the shelter, which we haven't gotten to that detail yet, but we had to kind of look at that in terms of where we wanted to place an appropriate place to put the shelter. And really that includes a direct afternoon sun, maintaining circulation around the site. Part of the questions we had to ask was there, ADA routes here, will it work? Also looked at, these view sheds of the trails and the potential way to locate the shelter, and looked at existing benches, kiosks, the trash receptacles on site. Also looked at potential temporary food or a portable restroom location. And also another important thing we looked at is the potential electric service at the northwest corner of the parking lot there. And we've been in communication with Madison Gas and Electric, and they've verified that location will work to serve the shelter's needs. You can go to the next slide. So we also did this topographic survey, a site survey, and there were found no adverse conditions that were documented. We looked at and marked the ordinary high water mark within our CAD survey, all the existing vegetation, and got detailed elevations of the topography on the site. We also hired subbed out a geotech to investigate the soils on the site, and generally they found sand and gravel material that was reached between 4 and 6.5 feet at the proposed shelter location. And their report gets pretty detailed in their recommendations, but one of their recommendations was a typical footer depth of 48 inches minimum to ensure no frost heave, which is fairly typical for any sort of footer depth required on a shelter. And we do have a little bit of flex room where if we do need to go deeper, we can. They also had information in regards to proper subgrade prep below the structure. You can go to the next slide. So at this point, I'll turn things over to Parker, who will go into a little bit more detail of the Black Earth Creek and how it functions and impacts the site here.
Right. So our first step in the H&H step was to assess peak flows on Black Earth Creek at the shelter. The 1% annual chance, or the 100-year discharge from FEMA. So what's in the flood insurance study and what is sort of out of the letter of the law, what you have to design these to, is 1350 cubic feet per second. We did look at the August 2018 flood just because that's fresh on everybody's memory, and that discharge from a gauge upstream of the site was more than double that at 2780 CFS, and that's sort of shown on the image to the right, which is just the raw USGS gauge data, and kind of shows that was quite the anomaly in terms of what what is typically seen out there even during high flow periods. So we wanted to at least take that into consideration too when looking at this site. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The second thing we wanted to do was determine the water velocity along Black Earth Creek at the shelter location. When we did the 100-year floodplain modeling, we got a velocity in the overbank, so outside of the channel area, of 2 feet per second. And the August 2018 flood, the velocity in that model was 2.7 feet per second. So relatively low velocities in this area. But that's still something we wanted to take into account. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The next thing we wanted to look at was depth of flooding. And we see relatively a larger difference in this parameter between the 100-year and the August 2018 flood. 100-year was 1 to 1.5 feet, and the August 2018 flood was 2.5 to 3 feet. So that's that's more significant than the velocity, but typically shelters are taller than that, so it's not as big of a concern with something this tall. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we ran a number of scenarios to sort of test the feasibility of different options on the site, and I'm not going to run through these in greater detail. We can come back to those if we need to. But the key with this is to build in what's called the floodway, which is where the shelter will be located. We have to certify that we meet what's called a no rise, which is essentially the building can't increase the regional flood height or the base flood elevation. So the point of modeling is to show, when we compare a certain scenario with the existing baseline condition, what's the difference? And it has to be 0.00. Even 0.01 is unacceptable. So we've run a couple of different scenarios that ended up working on the site, and this isn't an all-inclusive list. There are other configurations, but we use this to sort of inform what the most feasible options are on the site. So go ahead and go to the next slide. We also did this. So the previous slide I should have noted was for the 100-year event. We also did this for the August 2018 flood, and like I said previously, this isn't something that by the letter of the law and by FEMA's and most community standards. This isn't something that we necessarily have to design for, but it's something that we at least wanted to take in consideration in planning for this. So just as an anecdote, even the ones that didn't meet the the regulatory no rise requirements, or the ones that did, I'm sorry, we see a 0.01 foot difference when we look at the August 2018 flood, just because of how much higher the discharge is. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this sort of ties what I've been talking about together. As you can see, the image on the left shows the regulatory floodway. That's what's on the FEMA map, and the red box is about where our shelter is proposed to be at this time. And the image on the right is just some output from the modeling software that we use to determine no rise. And the goal ultimately is that the two lines, as shown in this image, are exactly the same. That's sort of the proof that we need to show. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide. So just as key takeaways from the modeling, the thinner the column we have, the better. The less columns we have, the better, and that makes sense. Just the less obstruction you have, the better off you're going to fare in terms of improving a no rise. And then we'll also include most likely some excavation of the slab in order to offset the obstruction of the post from the shelter. And that's just a very thin slab that you would do to make sure that you've got positive drainage, but also a flat slab. So go ahead and go to the next slide. These next couple of slides are just examples of floodway projects that I've been involved with here in Iowa. The one on the left is a dog park in Des Moines, Iowa, which is probably most closely similar to what we would put with the shelter in terms of the obstruction. We've got tables and a fence and other small structures involved with this, but it's just drives the point that this is another project where we had to do pretty much this exact same thing in proving that we don't increase the flood heights. The image on the right, I'm not going to take full credit for this because Snyder and Associates didn't construct this structure or wasn't involved in the construction of the structure, but we just did some renovations on it on the Des Moines River, which is a big river that runs through Iowa. And another example of, hey, you gotta, if this isn't the floodway, whatever you do, you got to show that it's not going to increase the flood heights. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Then these last two examples are, they're bridge projects, but it's the reason I put these here were to show that, you can put a fairly large structure in the floodway, as long as you're properly modeling it and showing that with some of your grading or other features that you may that you may incorporate in your design, you can offset a fairly sizable obstruction by showing it in your modeling. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
So this is Andy again. That about summarizes where our studies have landed, and we're kind of approaching this step 4 of schematic design. And the first phase here is just essentially kind of pinpointing the amenities that people requested and starting to compile some cost estimates. And I don't know if Mike wants to add any additional elements, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
No,
I don't have any necessarily to add to this other than discussion that you may have, obviously moving forward. So.
okay.
Andy, is that the end of the presentation?
Excuse me, what was that?
Is that the end of the presentation, Andy?
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have, Kevin?
Yeah, Mike, what specifically are you asking for from the board today?
Yeah, so what had happened, as you read through, if you go through everything that we've went through today, as part of in your memo that I had written, is kind of like how this all evolved and where we're at. And what we were left with was the village board making the decision to let's go forward and do this feasibility study. Is can we build it? Is there something that we can put in the shelter? And it's more or less tonight, or is there something we can put in the park? And it's more or less tonight, if the village board is comfortable with what was given to you in regards to the studying and saying like, yes, something could be in there. But obviously nothing that we put in there could negate any rise if we were to have a flood like we did in 2018. Is the village board more or less comfortable with us moving forward on the next tasks, which would be task 2.1 all the way through task 8, kind of understanding where we're going and what this project could be.
Bill?
And then what was the recommendation from Park and Rec?
The Park and Rec did, yes, they did approve to move forward on to task point 2.1 at that time, which technically would take us through to task 8 prior to obviously any construction being done.
Anybody else? So if I understand what you've given us, that would be another 22,765?
No. What we'd be looking for is from tonight, is kind of just puts us in the direction to get through task 8, which would be roughly another $5,800 or $6,000.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we move forward suggest you move forward with phase 1 task 2.1, not to exceed a cost of $6,000.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? Michael?
Well, I'll just say that, I know you did all the modeling and everything, but in the spirit of the ordinance, a structure really shouldn't be built in this park when we're in this conservancy. You see flooding happening. It's very dangerous. It's a floodway. Trying to prevent flooding and continuing on with a project where we aren't keeping in the spirit of our ordinance is, in my opinion, very dangerous. It's a great project. It's just in the wrong place. I've said that before, and I'll say it again.
Bill Chang, do you have,
Yeah, so I'm gonna add in some comments here. So in order for, I think, Andy and Snyder to complete task 2.1, I think that there may have to be some more direction as far as to what type of structure, and then understanding eventually what the full commitment may be. As part of your packet, you will see that Andy and Mike have provided cost estimates for the structure itself. It does not include any additional groundwork, asphalt work, on-site engineering, that could be included in that. And so as you can see on, I want to make sure that everyone's looking at the same thing. Sarah, can you see the Snyder and Associates?
You can check my camera.
I can see it, yes, task 2.1, task 3.
Okay, let me,
Oh, I'm sorry, task 2.1 up here.
correct. Yeah, just give me a minute here, the village board can't see that right now.
I can't, oh, if I move this, it's not, I can't see the right margin area. Yeah, there you go. There, perfect. Did you need something else from me, Bill?
No, I just have to fix it on my side here so that the village board, and people in the room can see, the same thing. All right, let's try this again. So task 2.1 does have them providing an estimate of probable cost. And again, I think in order to do that, since the structures vary so much in difference, I would recommend some kind of discussion around that, provide a clear path forward for Snyder so that we're not, back here, talking about different types of design.
Well, Bill, the motion though was not, the motion was to move forward with some of this stuff. I think I would prefer we get that motion done, and because if it's voted down, we're done. If it's voted for, then we can have that discussion about structure.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted.
I purposely left the structure discussion out of my motion.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Kettlebaiter?
Yes.
Trustee Brochus?
Yes.
Trustee Paul Mikowski?
No.
Trustee Thuzius?
Yes.
Trustee Francois?
Yes.
Trustee Zander?
Yes.
President Langfeld?
Yes. So now what Bill brings up is, and instead of us discussing there's got to be 20 different options, I think what would be helpful is that this goes back to the Parks and Recreation with stating that the dollar amount, that is to me the critical part of this. We're looking at this construction and everything at 22,000. There were structures anywhere from 50 to 165,000. I don't think it's worth spending a lot of time on them coming back with a project that's going to be up around 200,000 if people aren't willing to do that. I think it's also important to tie down the Lions Club on how much they're willing to kick in. I know it's been anywhere from 20 to 35,000. So I think we need to give them some guidance. I don't really think we want to spend the time to go over all these shelters and that. I think what are people thinking on what they feel the village is willing to spend on this? And please keep in mind that that means other things will come off that capital improvement list. Because we budgeted 25,000, we'll have, I think we've spent about a third of that already. So I think that's a lot of people in this room voted for that amount. Obviously 50,000 isn't going to cut it with a 25-25. So I think what I would like to hear is where people are thinking on what they're willing to spend on this project. Mike?
Yeah, and I will just state that the Parks and Recreation Committee didn't get to see those numbers, so those weren't all ready for our meeting on Monday, otherwise they probably would have come back with something.
Okay,
Can
Bill?
we ask Snyder's to see if they have the information that they need to conduct task 2.1? I mean, I want to be able to give them a clear you know, if we're gonna ask them to complete task 2.1, I wanna make sure that they have that information that they can.
Agreed 100%.
I would need to just actually say it.
Okay,
I mean, it's, go ahead.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, Jay, I appreciate what you said. I think that comes down to what is the village interested in spending, because there are non-village, monies out there, grants out there, whatever out there that won't come out of our pocket directly. So even if we say 50,000, whatever number, we could pick a $200,000 or an $80,000, depends on what that gap, how that gap is made up. And so I agree that we should sort of get the village, what the village comfortable with, at least now, boards change, and they will before we vote on this in fall again. So, but to give them some idea, I think is fair. And then also, if you look at their study though, they already limited it down to a couple different ways, and I'm sure their table is even greater than they showed here, but 40 by 30 with minimal columns, 4 columns, we start peeling away a few of these options that are on this list too. And so in between those two things, I think they should have plenty of direction.
Okay, so Kevin, I think that's a great way of doing it. I appreciate that. What are people comfortable with the village portion of this project?
Myself,
Let's just go, we'll start with Sarah. So,
I just wanted to know if Bill was able to answer Michael's question. Like, is there anything in our village ordinance that actually prohibits this?
Yes, so we did review the ordinance, and we've been working with Snyder to let them know what we would be looking for. Essentially, biggest concern would be the no rise. The zoning code does allow for an accessory structure, which would be a passive recreation use, to be constructed within the floodway. So simple answer is yes, it can be constructed, but they must meet the no rise and provide the proper certification.
Thank you. And then what was the balance that we have from what we had originally budgeted? I just want to verify. We originally budgeted 25,000 and we've spent.
So in previous years, $25,000 was budgeted. This project in the current year is not budgeted.
So, but of the 25,000, what were you spend?
Yeah, we spent, I would actually have a question mark, but I'm thinking roughly 5,200. It will be
5,200. So
spent
of
today.
their earlier commitment, we spent about 5,000, so we have about 20,000, a little less than 20,000.
Maybe a little more. We might have spent a little more.
A little bit more than
Yeah,
that.
not a lot. I mean, it's
Okay.
in that range.
Around 18,000, let's put it that way. That's that. So, Sarah, how much more are you willing to vote for or recommend for the village to put in?
Me, I think we stick with what we initially budgeted for our portion, the just over 20,000.
Okay. Bill?
I'm happy with the 25,000 we originally voted for.
All right, Kevin?
I would propose in the coming fiscal capital budget, something in like a $25,000 additional.
Additional to the 18?
Yes, additional to the 18.
So
45.
45?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael?
I would like to see no additional funding. I would rather see that funds be spent to improve neighborhood parks that we have that's coming up in the capital fund. We've seen what the Great Park over on Bourbon does to morale in the village.
All right. Lori?
I would like to see us do our original amount.
Okay. Judy?
I'm willing to go the extra 25 in next year's budget. So do our 18 now and then do an additional 25. But I'm also hoping that we do a lot of fundraising to get a lot more money.
I would do a dollar for dollar match of what the Lions donate. That's what I would do.
Okay, I would agree with that.
I would support that.
Me too. I would too.
All right.
In excess to the current amount, or
I
does
would,
that count?
no, I would include that.
Okay.
So if they do 35, we would do 35. All right, well, you kind of have
Yeah.
where we're at. We're not going to hold on that because we really don't really have that.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, did you get what you needed?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
All right. Very good. All right, we'll go to number 2, discussion and possible action on well number 3, layouts and placement. Ben?
Hello, everyone. So this is to follow up on our discussions from last month, which, just to refresh everybody's memory, we had 3 concept drawings for well 3. Concept 1 was basically kind of operationally the ideal situation, tucked in the back of the park, larger building, larger access. Concept 2 was basically that same concept, just a slightly smaller building. And after we kind of lopped off all of the different components we had been talking about, where we're now just down to a bare well house. There's no garage, there's no pavilion, there's no bathrooms. Concept 1 and concept 2 are kind of the same thing for all intents and purposes. They're very close to each other. They're not much different in building size. And then concept 3 was try and minimize the impact of the park, tuck the well house as far back on the backside of the park as possible and minimize the amount of pavement. And then at the last board meeting, we decided to add a concept 4, which was move the well house towards the front of the park, get it as far forward as possible, addressing a couple of the public's comments during a public meeting, which is what Bill is showing here. We did have a public meeting last week. I'm blanking on which day it was, but last week sometime, Tuesday. And had a few people, not nearly as many people who participated as the last time. Of the people that commented, there was generally support shown for concept number 4, which was moving the well house as far forward as possible. I have also, I'll just finish going through everything, and then Jay, I'll let you kind of fill everybody in on your conversations. There's also project cost estimates included. We did a cost estimate for each of the conceptual drawings that breaks out the actual well construction, the well house, sanitary, sewer, and water main extensions, streets, and then the SCADA portion of the project. I did not include anything associated with well 2, even though you guys did direct us last time to include that. It's just, that's the same no matter what we pick for this well 3 option. The other thing that's not included in any of this is there is a component of park structure relocation associated with concept 4 that is not addressed in any of this. We're just something is going to have to be done. We draw a perimeter just arbitrarily that creates the same square footage, but ultimately it doesn't mean a whole lot. We didn't design a park. This is just, you will have to relocate park structures if you pursue concept 4. So you can also see kind of across the board, there's not a huge variation in total capital costs. One of the big other things with concept 4 is the sanitary sewer from basically 200 feet upstream of the well or up the hill from the well to 200 feet down the hill from the well, or north and south, would have to be replaced because of the proximity to the roadway, proximity to the sanitary sewer. So that's included in these estimates. The reason for that is we're less than 200 feet from the sanitary sewer, so it has to be constructed of water main grade materials. So that all of that sanitary sewer would have to be relayed, and actually the manhole out in the street in front of it would have to get removed. It's been further complicated by, and I'll hand this out, we weren't really expecting as much support for the concept number 4 as was provided. So we asked DNR some more questions about it, just to confirm things. There is some vague language, language in the code that references that you're supposed to locate a well central in the parcel. That's generally been just assumed as guidance in the past. DNR did Boy, that really shows up horribly on there, doesn't it? DNR has taken the position that the well house needs to be 50 feet from the edge of a parcel, no matter what. I think it's a little bit ambiguous, but that's their interpretation. So they have said they would not approve concept 4 as it's been discussed thus far. They would entertain moving it forward, but it has to be greater than 50 feet from any parcel lines. So that drawing that you've got, that's what DNR gave us back in response. So there's red shading that basically follows the property lines for the park as to where the well could be located. You'll see that basically if you wanted to move it as far forward as possible, you're going to be popping it right in the middle of the playground area. I do continue to disagree with the DNR's interpretation of the code. However, DNR has not been the easiest to work with. They also wanted me to make sure it's known to the village that DNR would not be in favor of relocating the well closer to the road, specifically because you're moving it, even with replacing the sanitary sewer with water main class pipe, you're moving it closer to a potential contamination source. It will still meet the code by moving it closer, but they don't like that you're moving it closer. So that's the rundown of well 3. I don't know if you want to add anything, Jay?
Yeah, so Tuesday we had the Zoom public hearing. 2 individuals spoke. One lives right next to the park. The other one lives down Tilldale Way. I was not comfortable with only hearing from 2 residents. So I ended up, well, let me backtrack. So Wednesday, since we heard that, Jerry, Mike, and I went to the park, and we looked at it and we decided if it's gonna be moved to the front of the lot, we put it right in the center. You're gonna lose the equipment even where they recommend it, because you can't take that equipment, cut it in half. So we were gonna center it pretty much where that square is in the middle. You can kind of see the playground. It would be right basically where the sign is of the current of the park. Now, we were only gonna go 20, 25 feet back, because at the time, that's what we thought. So it'd be even with the houses and stuff. But yes, that playground would have to be removed. And it would be right next to the drive, so we would use the current driveway to get to the well house. I'm not, 50 feet puts it even farther back there, so couldn't tell you exactly, but the main equipment would be gone no matter what we did. So, and that's when we also learned about having to move the pipes. So on Saturday, I ended up putting the 4 options in a little note, and I put them at all the houses around the park on both sides of the street. And I told them that I would come back on Sunday and answer their questions. So everybody, the 12 houses that are mostly impacted by the well in this, were at least contacted with a sheet of paper and an opportunity to meet with me on Sunday. So on Sunday, we met 8 of the 12 residents were represented there, and it was very, very clear that their choice or their preference would be to have it in the front to save the space in the back. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, their number 1 choice was not to have the well there at all, but we already have moved beyond that, and I fell the ground there. So, you know, my feeling is now this is new information. So after that Sunday, I sent emails to the gentleman to see if they could get some clarification from the DNR. And I guess we have it now 50 feet. And I'd have to go back out there to see how 50 feet, and what else it affects.
You would just take the well house and put it right smack dab in the middle of the playground. Would put you at 50 feet.
Like where the swings are?
Basically where the swings are.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's 50 feet from the parcel line.
Okay. Well, anyways, I just wanted, and I told them that I would be sharing that with them. And my feeling is the well we need as a village. There's no doubt. We do not want to go through what Texas is going through. It's a great demonstration what happens when you don't have access to municipal water. So that's the need. It was determined after the last study that this is where it's going from people who worked on this prior to, so it has to go in here. But where it goes on the lot, to me, I clearly think the residents, their say has a lot of power to me, because they're the ones that have to live with it. So, like I say, I don't know if that would have changed a lot of their minds, putting it 50 feet versus 20. I know we have one person here that we can hear from, but that's where I'm coming from, if we even have to take one more month to look that out, I think it's important to hear from the residents. And that's just where I'm going, we need the well, it needs to be there, but where there, I'm very open to what the residents want. Or should we let, why don't you go ahead and speak?
Hi, guys. I know several of you, some I don't. My name is Matt Hassler. And if you look at your photograph here, I live in the house on the corner right next to the park. And then on the other side of the park is the Fitz-Randolph family. And then the Schweitzers are next door to me. And if you look at the photograph, I think, and just picture if it's your backyard, and look at that beautiful green space. You have the hill, you have the woods, and that's why each and every one of us chose the lots that we chose when we built the houses years ago. We do want to go on record to say that we hate it, that you couldn't have chosen an alternative spot, but you were very kind in explaining that to us yesterday. However, if it does need to be here, it was unanimous that we want it as far towards the road as possible as not to obstruct the green space in the back. Fair enough?
Thank you, Matt. All right, so that's what I have to add to the discussion. Okay, I'm gonna go Bill, Kevin, was it Judy?
Yep.
Okay, Bill, Kevin, Judy.
So I would be really concerned putting it, so if we're looking at the map on the screen, that clear area right in the center, which is right in the center of the park, so the residents are willing to lose their playground to have green space in their back. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I think their idea is that the playground would be moved to the back farther of the lot.
Then you still lose that green space for.
I'm just finding out what they.
I understand, but, right, so regardless, in my opinion, and it makes more sense to me to put that location as far back and in the corner as possible, so you have maximum amount of green space against that hillside, and you don't mess with the playground. That's where I would tend to go. I understand what they're saying, but I think with the new 50-foot regulation, I don't think the residents want to lose their park. I think that would be a bad option. That's all. And then we talked to the police chief about locating that well in the front where you lose line of sight from the road behind it. Have we talked to the chief about that?
I have not talked to the chief. The residents, I brought that up with the residents.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I would be interested to hear what chief has to say about that as a safety feature.
Kevin, then Judy.
Thanks, Jay. First, thanks for going out and taking the extra measure, for checking on with the neighbors. I want a question for Mike. If this were to come up to, say, the southern portion of the 50 feet, going as far south as you can, but not as far south as it shows here in the map, it pretty much means development of the park space. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And that may even be where the no longer necessary road is. So, and that's gonna cost 150,000 maybe, something like that. So it's gonna be, and that's not figured in here, is that correct?
Correct.
But is that something that also can be borrowed for as part of this project?
So that's going to get a little bit fuzzy. Right now, the plan is you're going to borrow through the Safe Drinking Water Fund.
Yeah, right.
I anticipate DNR is very sensitive about allowing non-water related costs to be included. We have been successful with things like SCADA, where we can show kind of the domino effect of, we're adding this to your SCADA system. All of your SCADA system has to be up to date, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they're going to allow you to put any park improvements on a loan, especially given the review department's position on they have zero interest in you having it at the front of the park anyway. So I would say probably likelihood is very low.
Hey, Judy?
Before I could vote on the number 4 option, I would have to know what the cost of the relocating the park would be, because I do think that add up. I'm with Bill. I think actually if we can, I like 3, because I feel like 3 is pushed way back, and I hope, I know to give up green space, hopefully you're only giving up that little bit way in the back. And I understand that they want it up front, I'm surprised they do, but if it's gonna cost us way too much more to do it up front, because I do want to respect your opinion, and Jay, I give you kudos to you, I think you're the only president that's ever done that, so good for Jay. But I would almost say like 3 is way in the back, as tight to that hill as we can, that would be the one that I think would be the most cost.
Michael?
Well, I'd say listen to what the residents requested. They're the ones that have to live there and live with this building. And clearly they want to preserve their green space and preserve their hillside. We work for the residents of the village. I agree we should look at what the cost is for the park, but this is their neighborhood and I would like to keep it as much at their request as what they're desiring.
Lori?
I think if it comes down to, it's a lot to move the park. I think that's something that needs to be looked at, and I'm not in favor of spending a lot of money to bring it that much forward. And another concern is if the DNR is saying that the contamination of water could be higher, I think we really need to look at that too, that it's not just about the view, it's about safety, and our water is a huge safety concern.
All right, Sarah, and then Michael.
I just wanted to just verify that this was pre-planned with the neighborhood, correct? Like that this would be the future well site, and that land people were notified of that when they purchased their properties. I just want to verify that because I thought that came up.
What happened is they did a study probably 15, 20 years ago.
It was in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s. And that area was chosen even before it was developed. When the developer came in, they saved this lot for the well. It was not on the plat, which is probably a good thing we should do in the future. But in developer agreement, it clearly states that the future well would be in that lot, and it means how far they have to be away from the other 2 lots. So it's in the developer agreement, but again, you gotta remember that's 15, 20 years ago those houses were built, so. So legally there was notification of this many, many years ago.
Okay, that's all.
All right, Michael?
All right, I'm gonna just kind of talk some craziness here. I know in one of the emails, somebody talked about moving the well up by P between the 2 developments on the strip that was there beneath the hill. My question is, I know that this spot was selected, but is that a spot ever that a well could go on?
Nope.
I mean,
That
just
one-
even with just regardless
For all
of,
of the reasons that we're talking about here, that site is, I have looked at it, it does not meet any of the code required offsets.
is it just because it's close to the hill and,
Well, there's a lot of things.
or the road? I
Yeah,
mean?
there's not as much space there as one would assume, and just even the 50 foot from the parcel, I don't even know that you have 50 feet of flat ground there that is actually parcel, not right away.
Right,
And after my meeting Sunday, I went there to look, because they had mentioned that.
right,
And that rock outcrop is pretty far, plus that's easement and with power lines, and I know there's a huge distance, you can't put a building underneath power lines, so I'm not an engineer, but I could tell with how much space that it's flat, and I think that's because of the easement, and then it shoots up to that point.
right.
I think we have to go with this. I don't think location should even be discussed.
Right,
I mean, outside of that lot.
Right, I just wanted to bring that up because
Yeah.
if we're talking about relocating a park at a cost of $100,000, that's about what it cost to drill the test well. So, you know, that was why I was.
All right, I have Bill.
So I really appreciate the neighbors coming forth at the Zoom meeting on Tuesday and coming here tonight talking about this. But I believe we have between, 70 and 90 homes in that subdivision. And this is a community park, and that park facilitates the entire community, not just the 10 homes that are around this park. I understand what they're asking for, but if we're gonna put a well house right in the middle of the park, we have to consider the rest of the residents that are in that area that use that park. And I don't think we are right now. I think we're just looking at those residents that are around that park. I appreciate you going out and talking with them, you know, that was fantastic, but it's a much broader scope than that, so.
Okay, so we can move this along. It sounds like what we're definitely gonna need, and I don't know if this is possible, Ben, can this be put to March? And Mike could have a better idea now that we've got some distances on, a little bit more on what it would take and the cost.
But I don't want to speak for Mike.
No, that's what I'm looking at, yeah.
I do want to throw one more thing in there is, I think it's going to be all of 150, and with this 50-foot offset, I think you're going to be talking about probably an additional $50,000 worth of earthwork just to prep the site. So I guess my question back to the board would be, is there a dollar value relative to that relocation that's going to make your decision? Because I don't see, especially given where the DNR is limiting us to now, that is not going to be a cheap endeavor, and you're basically going to start over with that whole park. So it's not just relocating or buying new equipment, it's kind of a whole new flow to that whole park, I would anticipate. And you can add whatever.
No, and I
you
think-
want to add.
Yeah, and then that's correct. That park itself isn't well for ADA purposes anyways as you go further up that hillside. So you have to meet all ADA requirements in regards to a playground to get anyone that can do that playground. So there will be a lot of earthwork that will have to be done if it does get moved further back. I do also have some safety, concerns in regards to the building being up front and kids being behind it. And I guess the other thing I would ask is maybe we have a neighborhood meeting with all of them to let them know what playground they get. I mean, that's what it really comes down to as well. Like knowing that they wouldn't get the exact replacement aspect, it may be a lot smaller just to try and meet those needs within the budget constraints.
All right. Bill?
Well, two things. First, Ben, would you be able to talk about the timeline and help answer Jay's question in regards to how much time we have? And then two, are we taking any comments from people on Zoom?
No, we'll have that, Ben go with the timeline. I'm hoping, if need be, we'd have more information for the March meeting, and then that way people could comment then.
So just from a timing standpoint, our big deadline at this point is we have to have plans and specifications and a loan application into DNR by June 30th. Ideally, a decision would be made tonight because I'm anticipating it's going to involve some level of change to the design documents we've got put together already because we've just been updating the site plan to date. I'm not going to say we couldn't get it done if it was taken up at the March meeting, but certainly we couldn't go beyond that in order to get it in by that June 30th deadline.
Lori?
I think with the cost of them basically losing or redoing, and we're talking $150,000, I think the original plan of it being up close, is what. I mean, we can talk in circles, but we're talking a lot of money to just move a park that they're wanting to keep a place for the kids to play and green space, and we're eliminating a lot of what they're trying to keep, is what I'm feeling, so
Judy?
I can't vote for the moving up to the street tonight without knowing the actual cost, knowing like what it will take to redo their playground and everything else. And if they make the playground a lot smaller, these people might not want to do it. If the playground, you know, they want their green space, and I get that, which means then the park would be a lot smaller, and I don't know if the kids would like that either. So I could vote for having it close to the street tonight, not knowing numbers.
No, and that's why I'm trying not to do a vote. I'd like to send it back to staff, because if we're gonna turn it down, and I hear where everybody's coming from, it'd be nice to have the numbers so we can say, these are the numbers, instead of speculating what the numbers are. Ben?
Can I just add to that? And I mean, again, don't want to speak for Mike, but it's going to be really tough to come up with numbers that are more precise than $150,000 or $200,000 for all of the reasons that Mike pointed out. Is we're getting that done without a full conceptual design of the park, which isn't going to happen in 30 days. Because you're not going to get any more precise than what we're talking right now. Because just to figure out the grading of the park that's an endeavor in and of itself.
Bill?
So I'm gonna try and move this along tonight, based on what the conversation is. I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the concept number 3 for well number 3, which is as far back as possible. That gives as much green space as possible for the residents, and it's more of a safety issue, and it's also the least amount on the project cost estimate summary.
I'll
Right.
second.
So I have a motion and a second to move forward with option 3 of the 4 options. Is there any discussion? Kevin?
I'd rather see option 4 play out fully. I will vote no on that motion.
All right, any other discussion?
I just want to say I agree with Kevin on that.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Trustee Francois?
Yes.
Trustee Zander?
yes.
Trustee Kettlebaiter?
Yes.
Trustee Brochus?
Yes.
Trustee Paul Mikowski?
No,
Trustee Thuzius?
No.
President Langfeld?
No. All right, motion carries. Number 3, discussion and possible action on impact fee calculation.
So this also is following up from conversations last month relative to impact fees. I'm going to just walk through the general information on it. And then we also have Kevin Krasinski from Johnson Block here to answer any questions relative to kind of rate impact side of it. After last month's meeting, we talked about a variety of potential approaches to the impact fee. And again, this is specifically for well number 3. And what an impact fee does is it allows you to charge developments for basically the costs associated with their capacity in any proposed improvements. So this memo kind of just summarizes my analysis and recommendations for this moving forward. A couple updates from last month. just as the statute reads, impact fees do need to be used within 8 years. Jay, I don't know that you saw this yet, but so impact fees have to be used within 8 years of the time they are collected. So you basically have an 8-year rolling thing. That doesn't play into so much well 3 because you're going to be building well 3 right away. And so the actual use of those impact fees as your community grows and you collect those, you get to use them right away to pay debt service. It plays more into the reservoir and the impact fees for the reservoir because that is potentially more than 8 years out. The big thing with 8 years is if you go beyond that in expense, you actually have to refund those plus any interest earned on those dollars. Impact fees can only be used for the duration by which you are collecting them. So if we decide you're going to do a 25% impact fee on well 3, once you collect that 25% of your capital, you have to discontinue that impact fee. So just you can't collect more than you were originally planning to is basically the gist of that. And then just to be clear, this is not an impact fee that would include well 2, even though well 2 is going to be constructed in conjunction with well 3 or the well 2 rehab because that's existing facilities, so that's considered a maintenance type project. Similarly, we're not talking impact fee for anything associated with the SCADA improvements that we've been talking about. This is just well 3 and then potentially just the reservoir. For well 3, the previous impact fee calculations were done assuming build out of some of your currently planned development areas for a total of 381 additional units. I am using the 650 gallons a minute capacity we talked about, even though we are talking about designing well 3 for 900 because 650 is the on paper, that's the capacity that you need to establish. Going to 900 is really to provide you that buffer for well number 1 should that ever go down. So ultimately what that results in is a recommended impact fee of 27% of the capital cost. The well 3 capital cost, actually with what we just chose, is about 1.8 million, which puts you at about $1,333 per unit impact fee. One of the concerns that was asked about last month was how does this affect your eventual rates? So I've got the numbers there from Kevin put together an estimate. So you'd be looking at a 12 to 15% rate increase. This is for the whole project now in 2022 and then an additional 10% in 23. The reason for those rate increases on the 2 scales is because well 2 wouldn't go online with the renovations until 2023, so PSC would not allow you to increase rates prior to 2023. Kevin does, and I can let Kevin talk at some point here as well, but Kevin did feel comfortable that based on the information we know today, you would be able to meet your debt coverage requirements when your loan closing happens next spring. So you will be generating enough revenue with the 2022 rate increase to accommodate that, and that once both rate increases are in place, even with the 27% impact fee, if you would have sufficient cash flow to continue operating your water utility. And the reason that was a concern last month is PSC does not allow you to take into account the portion of the project that you're impact feeing in your rate increases. That's in so they don't allow that to be covered by your user rates because it's anticipated that you're going to collect those revenues via the impact fee. So that's well number 3. The reservoir is a little bit more open-ended. That one I am proposing or recommending an impact fee of 21%, which results in $1,378. That is an estimated impact fee associated with those same 381 lots. I did not go to the full build out because that would result in a much higher percentage. Again, in the theme of somehow you're going to have to pay for this when you actually build it, and if the development doesn't happen in a reasonable amount of time, you're going to have trouble generating revenue associated with it. So I took a little bit, even though the reservoir is being designed for much more growth into the future, because that's more of a 50 to 100-year style investment as opposed to a 20-year style capacity investment. I did limit that a little bit in my recommendation. The last part of this is the actual recommendation. I would propose imposing the impact fee for well 3 is a reasonable fiscal approach to doing things with well 3. I would maybe hold off on imposing a reservoir impact fee because of that rolling 8-year refund requirement to a point that you're a little bit more certain that that's actually going to happen. Right now, obviously the reservoir, we had 5 options presented last month. It's going to be kind of driven by when and where development happens, and to think that that's going to happen in the next 10 years is uncertain. So I think certainly finishing up the public facilities needs assessment that's required by statute to implement these would be a good thing. I would recommend we include the reservoir impact fee in that. However, when you guys enact the ordinance implementing the impact fee, you would leave the reservoir out and wait until such time that the reservoir is actually on the horizon, because it's not really on the horizon right now.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Ben on this topic? I just want to just make the reservoir part, basically, if we would collect an impact fee, then we're pretty much tying ourselves to, we would have to build it within 10 years, or we'd have to refund the money. So I think it's best not to commit to something. 10 years seems like a long ways away, but it comes here, and I don't think we're even close to being for, building a reservoir. So I think the strategy that we came up is, with all the work on it, when we know and have it in the plan, then we can act on ordinance. Just wanted to make sure. Last meeting, we actually talked about collecting. All right, do I have a motion, please?
Excuse me, Jay, could I make a comment?
Vern, Jesse.
Sure.
Thank you very much. For those who don't know, I'm the attorney for the Creek Crossing development. This information in the form of the 2-page memo was not in the agenda packet that was available beforehand. So I'm looking at this for the very first time. I also note that we don't still have the needs assessment, which is a critical part of our ability to evaluate whether what's being proposed is appropriate. So I don't know if the motion that might be made is to actually approve this. But if that's the case, I would respectfully suggest that this be put off until the next meeting so that we, on behalf of Creek Crossing and anyone else who has an interest in this, can actually take a look at the information in this memo and see the needs assessment. It seems unusual to me to be actually adopting this without that opportunity afforded to the interested people. Thank you.
This has been, I wholeheartedly concur. This is not intended to be you guys approving, and I should have said that, approving an impact fee. I am recommending an approach to the impact fee, and I want your guys' concurrence, because last month we looked at a whole pile of different potential approaches. There will be a public facilities needs assessment that will be presented, and you guys will approve that. And even beyond that, you will need to enact an impact fee ordinance. So there's multiple steps after this that you will need to do. And in fact, the numbers, I mean, we've been working off of 4 different concepts for well 3 in addition. So I'm using kind of the most aggressive numbers. So all of this needs to be fine tuned. This is what direction do you want us to head with finalizing the public facilities needs assessment, which is a statutory requirement. And then you will enact an ordinance to establish those impact fees.
Ben, thanks. I appreciate that clarification. I was most concerned when I looked at the 3 bullet points under the heading of recommendation with the first one that says impose a 27% impact fee, as if that reads to me like a decision being made. But if you're telling me that's not happening this evening, I appreciate the clarification.
All right.
So this is Bill. So I agree with you, Jay, that we look at just the impact fee for the well. and not worry about one for the reservoir yet until we're more committed to actually doing that.
So I guess I'm not sure, what
Basically,
action are you looking for?
I just need confirmation from you that this is the direction you want the public facilities needs assessment to be written in, and then I will bring that back to you for final confirmation of.
And everybody good with him moving forward on this? I guess there's no action needed. All right. Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Ben.
Yep.
All right, we'll move to discussion and possible action regarding the police department patch. Is the chief on, or?
We do have the chief on with us. Go ahead, Chief.
Hi there, can everybody hear me? I'm on.
Yes.
So I prepared an amendment or a memorandum basically explaining what we were doing. I think I've had a conversation with every board member except for Sarah about the patch. So in celebration of the 100-year anniversary, we had thought early on last January to update our patch. And so as we were kind of planning for that, I asked Scott, who is our 30-plus year veteran, to take it upon himself to develop a new patch, something that we could still dealing with still having things like the bluffs and the creek and those kind of things embedded, but something he could leave kind of a legacy after all his service to our community. Not that he's retiring, but just something he could leave behind as something that he worked on. He did take some ideas from the staff, but ultimately it was all his decision. This is what he came up with after he presented it to the staff, and they loved it. And at this point, it has gone through our committee at Public Safety, and now it's here to present it to you all for discussion.
All right, thank you, Chief. Do I have a motion, then we'll go into discussion?
I'll make a motion, this is Kevin Thesis, I'll make a motion that we approve the police patch as presented today.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Open up for discussion. Michael.
Yeah, I have a concern about the patch being not the village logo. Our police department is part of the village, and the logo that we have is on letterhead. How are we choosing to brand ourselves? Does this set a precedent which allows the public facilities department to create their own branding mechanism, or the library? Are we trying to umbrella underneath one design? I went out and did some research. The city of Middleton, their police department uses their city logo. So does Monona, as does Verona.
Judy?
Is their fire department and all their EMS all the same too?
Those I didn't check on. I know here our fire department is composed of 3 different municipalities, so going underneath the village logo wouldn't be appropriate. I was just thinking, do we want a police car to show up that has the village logo on? I mean, this is in no disrespect towards Scott designing it or anything that he's done for our police department. I'm just talking about in terms of village branding. If a police car pulls up with the village logo on it, people recognize it. Where, focusing on community policing is having the logo on, mean they're part of the community. These are some of my thoughts.
Anybody else? Bill?
So the logo that we're sporting now, and I may need some guidance on this, but where that logo started from was Park and Rec created their own logo 4 or 5 years ago, and then more of the village started incorporating it because it was kind of a cool logo. I love this idea. I think it's fantastic. I don't think we have an official logo. I mean, we do. It's on our letterhead, but that came from Park and Rec. I think police does have their own identity. I think fire has their own identity. So does EMS. So I am all for this. I think this is great.
I guess I'm going to comment. I don't think there needs to be tied. I looked at the city of Madison logo, that changes every time there's a new mayor. They want to put their little personal touch on the city logo. The Madison Police Department patch, again, it shows the Capitol, significant parts of the community, and it says, police on it. I do like this. I think it's very simple, very nice looking. It shows what Cross Plains has to sell with the bluffs and the creeks. That's what people really look at. It has a star so people know where you're located when you go. So I like the job, I like it, and I'm with Bill. I don't see a need that everybody in the village has to be exactly the same. I think some identity, as long as it says Cross Plains on it. So Michael?
I understand that the logo came from Parks and Rec and that we're using it on our letterhead. And I think it was sort of ad hoc adapted as the village logo once at a village board meeting. I think it was just kind of like and assumed, like everyone just kind of nodded, and then it started to appear on the letterhead. Is really how I think it happened once. So, whether or not we want to, allow people to have independent patches or whatnot, we should probably figure out if we want the Parks and Rec, if it's the Parks and Rec, to be the village logo, or if it's just going to become the village logo. Because are we just sort of floating around, not knowing what is the village logo?
Yeah, we're not, that's getting us way off. I think what
I understand.
the motion is looking at this patch. I hear what you're saying, and that's another whole discussion.
And I agree, but that's why I wanted to say it.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Bill? I was up. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Sarah?
I like it a lot, but I definitely agree with Michael on consistency. At this point in our tiny little village, we've got about 15 different branding messages going on, including all the talk about signs. It's just, I would like to see, and I think we actually do have the logo officiated. I don't think we need to revisit that, but maybe Bill can let us know next month. But I thought that was officially determined to be the branding logo henceforth. I don't know, maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah, well, I can take a look at that and bring it back when we talk about branding.
All right, Bill.
You know what you could do? You could take the little logo that we have on the letterhead and replace the star. If that was that important, you could do that. But I still like what Scott did. It's nice and simple, and it's to the point.
All right, so any others? Otherwise, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Zander.
Yes.
Trustee Francois.
No.
Trustee Thuzius.
Yes.
Trustee Paul Mikowski.
No.
Trustee Brochus.
Yes.
Trustee Calvater.
Yes.
President Langfeld.
Yes. All right. Go to number 5, discussion and possible action regarding new squad car graphics.
Okay, can everybody still hear me? So those 3 graphics, basically the graphics that we have are dated. It's time for a new graphic package, but it's still going to say Cross Plains Police, which is something that I spoke to Jay personally about just before this all happened. The reason I brought it to the board and to the committee is because where you see the little star, I want to add the patch to it. And so if we were going to approve the patch, I thought we should definitely approve the squad package. Now, there's thousands and thousands of different styles and makes, and so in order to prevent 20 different choices, I narrowed it down to 3 that I would be comfortable with, and then my plan is to have the staff vote on the one that they want. And that's kind of the way I worked that out. There is no cost to it. This is already incorporated in the cost for the squad. So the costs are already in there. I just need your approval because the patch is going to go on the actual graphics.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused. You're gonna take the 3 choices you have here and send them to your staff, and then they get to pick?
They get, yeah, whichever one wins, I guess. Yeah, in some type of vote.
Okay, so I guess from the board, is anybody uncomfortable with any of the 3 choices? I hate to put a choice out there that people aren't comfortable with. Michael?
I was just gonna make a motion to allow the police department to select from one of the 3 designs presented.
Well, I just want to make, that's great, I'm looking for that, I just want, if someone has a real hardship on one of them, then I don't want that to be a choice and they vote it, and then we vote it down, I'm trying to avoid that. So go ahead, I haven't heard anything, go ahead and make your motion.
I make a motion to allow the police department to choose one of the 3 designs presented for the graphics for their vehicles.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, discussion. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. All right, thank you, chief.
Thank you very much, guys.
So the next one is discussion and possible action on a street lighting policy. I just want to give a little background on that. Michael's lead on this, and it was Michael, myself, Bill, and Jerry that wanted to make it where a developer, when they come in, they know exactly what we want, and that we get consistency throughout the village related to street light poles, light fixtures, and where we're going with the technology. So Michael's lead on that, so I'll let you take lead on the discussion. We've worked on it for what, about 6 months?
It's been about that long since the first kickoff meeting and waiting for MG&E to put up the trial lights and et cetera. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Let me start there.
Yes, what are you looking to do? I mean, there was a lot in here.
No, what we're looking is, if you go to PFD 87, the policy, this is the draft policy. We'd like to pass it tonight so it becomes a regular village policy.
Basically,
related to lighting, street lighting.
Basically, we were trying to standardize our pole to go to a concrete pole that will last a very long time unless somebody hits it. The second was to try to standardize the fixtures that would be selected, going with a 2700K LED fixture, just because this technology is changing and it will allow uniformity across the village, basically across the village is what the idea is.
Oh, Bill.
So are you looking to replace every street pole that's in the village right now, or just going forward?
Well, no, we're not looking to replace things right now. If they have, it says if it hasn't failed, we're not going to replace anything. This is going to be directing a lot of the new developments. In researching this, I kind of came across a nuance inside of the billing also for streetlights, how MG&E bills, whether or not the village owns the pole and the fixture or whether or not we lease it from MG&E. And that financial analysis, it's on the agenda for the finance committee is one of the things that I found was that if the village started to go to owning these things, in the long run, we could start to save a fair amount of money. Like right now, leasing a fixture that's going to last for 10 years, if you bought it, it might be paid off in 3 and the cost goes way down. Then you're just really paying for a very, very small fee and electrical usage. So it was things like that. So it was, so whether or not, and then it came up with which poles do we actually own and which ones don't we? And that question is now, hasn't been resolved yet.
Right, but to answer your question, it's for new development and when we replace a pole that is no longer useful.
Yeah, like if it's
so we're not replacing anything that's current, but if a car hits one of the fiberglass ones, we're going to replace it with concrete. So this just gives guidance.
Didn't we just put new pole? I'm just kind of what a thing. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
I'm only doing it once.
No, that's all right.
So we just put new poles up on Main Street, right?
that's exempt, that's totally different.
Yeah, that's exempt from the policy because they're actually village owned. MG&E doesn't do any servicing on them or,
DOT controls that.
yeah, you'd have to.
Oh, because it's a state highway?
Yeah,
So
you'd have to.
take that away. We don't.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, that's good information, right?
And it states it in here. It states that Main Street lights are exempt from this
Is
policy.
Church Street also?
No, Church Street is one of them.
Because we own that,
Yeah,
but we just sit on the right from there. And Church. Street-
Right. This is, again, this is just a simple policy for guidelines. Do I have a motion? Or did we already do a motion? No.
No.
are there any other?
I'll do it after the motion.
Yeah. Do we have a motion? I'll make a motion to accept the proposed streetlight policy 2121-1. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second discussion. Kevin?
Yeah, I was just wondering if this should have gone to plan commission? Usually these go through a committee before they come here with policy like this, and this one seems like a fit plan, and that was.
I just didn't think of that. I guess we could refer it to plan if you'd like. I mean, we worked as a small committee, but you're right, it could have easily fit in the plan. You want it to go to plan?
It probably should.
It should.
Yeah, I feel like it should.
All right, we'll just take, let's vote it down and send it to, all right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, same. Aye. All right, do we have a motion to refer it to plan?
I'll make a motion to refer this policy to the plan commission.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say refer to plan commission. All right, discussion and possible action regarding public facilities number 2 vacancy.
All right, so I'll take this one. So we've had a vacancy in our public facilities too, since the end of December. Since that time, we have advertised the recruitment on the village website, village Facebook, League of Wisconsin Municipalities. We printed it in the Milton Times Tribune and also added it to the Wisconsin Rural Water Association website and Indeed. To date, well, first of all, as part of the job announcement, we did state that the higher range was $17.25 to $19.34, since that is what is budgeted in the current cycle. Today we haven't had a complete application packet. That complete application packet includes a Village of Cross Plains employee application, resume, and 3 references. We have received a number of resumes. I have responded, but again, we have not received a complete application. And so I do list, as part of the packet, a number of other vacancies throughout communities that are similar to ours, that are also hiring for a similar position, so public works. And you can see in their current salary ranges. For the request tonight, in 2017, we did recruit for the same position. We actually hired 2 at that time. Or excuse me, in 2019, the initial recruitment was 2017, and that range was 1725 to 2415, and we hired 2 in 2019. So what we're doing here is we're asking, since it is an impact, would be an impact to the village budget this year and ongoing if we hire, obviously, that we be allowed to go to what the old range was, 2415. Of course, that's depending on qualifications.
Okay, just clarification, you want to go to a range of 1725 to 2415?
Correct. When we repost it.
Would we want to put that lower, a little higher, like 20 to 24? Because I think a lot of people might think that they're going to get start at the base and work out. Shouldn't we kind of move the base up?
You did 18 or 19.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at what our competition is. 20 would really put us ahead of almost everybody else or tied.
Are we gonna have to raise any of the funds that are there?
Well, that would be my next question. I'm just saying, I'm not sure if we move the last digit, the last number.
Jerry, should we get his input on it?
Well, yeah, we can do it, but I think I want to hear, I just want to get clarification
Yeah.
before we get input.
Yeah,
I don't know if, when we do ranges, if I haven't been looking, does the end range really matter as much as the starting range?
yeah, well, and this range reflects what was approved previously, so we're
Yeah.
mirroring that simply. It does give us a wider range to work with, but, if you look at the competition, I mean, it's above what our minimum range is. We got a hand with us there.
Go ahead, Sarah.
We have 2 people at this job title, right? Public facilities 2?
Oh, we have several, 4.
Several. Okay, so are we gonna then also, I'm assuming then we will match the salaries then for the current people in the position as well if this changes?
Well, we're not talking about, so there's 2 recommendations in my memorandum. One, I think the priority here would be to get someone hired so that, because they're short a person in their department. 2, my second recommendation is to take a look at a salary range. So right now, we do not have a salary scale. And we're hiring depending on qualifications and what we can negotiate at that time.
But I think what Sarah's asking, and Judy, what are our current employees getting paid per hour for this classification?
Yeah, I think that range is 19, I think, is the most recent one.
So we got 19, and what about the other 3? Where are they at?
So that's pretty much.
Low
the
20,
Very
low
close
20.
to that.
Yeah, they're not too much higher than that.
So then that's what I think Sarah and Judy are pointing out. If we hire someone new at $20 or even $24, it's only fair that those other people get moved. Doesn't make sense to have someone who's been here longer get paid less than someone who's brand new.
Yeah, that's.
So I think that has to be part of the calculation when we talk about it. I can't support starting at 24. That seems really high to me when you look at the ranges. But I have, like I say, and Bill's in his memo is referring to the county just did a big study of comparables for cities and villages in Dane County, and then they compared it, and we were going to use that once we started talking about salaries and stuff like that. It has very interesting data in it. But I don't want to get too deep into that. Bill?
So 2 observations or two comments about this is of all of these communities that are listed on the background, they're much larger than the village of Cross Plains as far as population and whatnot. And secondly, we are really close to Madison, and it is expensive to live in this community. So it's a quandary, kind of, because I understand we need to pay more because we're closer to Madison. We're in Dane County. It's super expensive to live in this community. But then again, we don't have the money to be able to, to that, McGuanago does, or a larger community does. That's my opinion.
Well, I really, you're going to be surprised. I guess I should forward all that comparable salaries. I'll send that report to you. I think you're going to be surprised how competitive we are in a lot of positions. There are some that we need to move up, but there are some that we're the top in for comparables. So I can pass that, but that's a whole different. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole tonight. But the question is, what are we going to do about filling in this position? Kevin?
Yeah, I think the key here is recruitment. How are we going to bring somebody in? And I understand that maybe somebody comes in, and if they come in with with DOQ, depending on qualifications. I mean, if their qualifications are great, you know, if they're already been doing this for 5 years somewhere else, or 10, or whatever it may be, we may need to hire them at some higher level. And so that's what the 2415 is about, higher qualified people. I think, you know, we need the carrot, first of all, something dangling in front of them to bring them in. And I don't mind, I mean, the $14,000 impact is what I think we should be looking at on our current fiscal year. And then as part B would be then getting into this reviewing of their employees. But I think right now we've tried to get this person, or we've had and lost this person, if I'm correct, quite possibly because the value isn't high enough for that job, or the money isn't high enough. So if we can get somebody really qualified, and it's 24, and they're going to be around for 10, 15, or 20 years, I think it's worth every penny. So that's all leave it at that.
Well, what if you have someone who this is their first job ever? You're still gonna pay them $5 more than someone who's been working here?
I think the low end is 17.
Oh, you're still saying keep the low end?
Well, yeah, that's what the request here is for, is just to move the upper end.
No, the recommendation I'm reading is that we set the position at 2415.
No, it's a
top of the salary
17.25
range.
to 415.
I'm reading that fiscal impact part.
Oh, right here.
It still says approve the top of salary range of this position too.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So the range would be 17
Okay.
to 24.
So I would be in favor of upping the lower range to 18, just to be competitive with the other communities.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way too. I'd like to see, I'd even go to 19, you know. Because I just think when people look at that, they look at the lower end thinking they can work up to the upper end, but I think the incentive should be more on the lower end than the upper end. But
Then I'll make a motion that the board accept a range for the public facility 2 job announcement to be from $18 to $24.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Discussion. All right, Sarah, you got anything to say on this?
No, if Kevin just spoke the words I would have spoken, so.
Okay, very good. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. So moved. All right, number 8. We will go to, the next one would be the memo that everybody should have received. And we will go right to what the first section, which is priority and order. That is after an item has been decided to be placed on the agenda. This is the priority that Bill and I use on when it comes up in the meeting. Are there any comments or suggestions to that section of the memo? Anybody? Okay. Great. Sarah, you wanted to say something?
No.
Okay. All right, the next one are steps taken to reduce the number of items and time spent on items. So these are what Bill and I have worked on over the last 18 months to try to make it so items are quicker discussed, you have more information, and they don't keep coming back a number of times. Are there any suggestions that Bill and I can be looking at to add to this list, or modifying any of these strategies, I guess is the word? Bill?
So it seems to me that what happens is when an item comes here after it's gone to a board, we basically start that discussion all over again after the board has sent their recommendations over to us. Or the committee, I'm sorry. You're right. And so, either, and I agree, the idea is, that's why we got rid of the committee of the whole, because we didn't want to discuss it and then discuss it again and vote on it, right? We want the committee to have that discussion go through all the heartache, like you guys did with the street lamps, you know, and have that discussion and then bring it to the village board. I don't think we as the village board need to rehash everything from start to finish. So maybe is it having better minutes from those meetings or the recordings available for those meetings? So if we have questions, we can listen to what was going on, and maybe they're available. They used to be, I don't know if they still are or not.
Yeah, the videos are posted and we try to keep up as best we can.
Okay, so, I mean, so I think, you know, if we as a member could not reinvent the wheel every time something comes out of committee, you know, that's gonna help. I mean, we're gonna have questions, right? We're definitely gonna have questions, but I understand the frustration from these committees that spend all this time going through this and then we start all over again. And that's what is going to help reduce the time in these meetings.
Okay, anybody else? Kevin?
I'll second what Bill said. Thank you, Bill. That was good. The other thing is that I was going to say is we often end up with agenda items like we saw today with, three, but there's certain things that aren't quite aren't complete. And we're looking for recommendations. Staff comes, I don't like comes, other staff comes, we need a recommendation about this. And I don't know how to resolve it necessarily, but I know it's an issue. How do we, the board, give staff guidance where they know kind of the direction we want without having to come in here? Now, Bill, or Jay, you go to staff meetings, but the rest of us don't. We're seldom involved, and I don't know. I mean, I call Bill, I'll call Mike, I'll even call Jerry at times. When can we have these discussions? You know, with folks that we can really dig into an issue if we have a question about it. And I think that slows us up quite a bit. They take something in one direction and we come and say nope, and then then they have to tack and go in this direction. And it's 2 or 3 or 4 meetings later, and I know they're frustrated. So at least I sense they are. For us changing tactics. So I think having some direction from the board, some way or shape or form before it hits the actual decision time would be helpful.
Okay, so how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's sort of in a non elected official role at work and other places. I'm sure we all use strategic plans, or goal documents, something that we all agree to what we want to try to get to in 6 months or a year. And how we get there might be different, or the end result might be different, but some sort of directive document or directive from the board would be helpful. We have the comp plan, but that's not quite detailed enough to really give details on it for the staff.
Would short-term goals, let's say quarterly goals, be something? Would that work?
I think it's worth trying.
Okay.
Or maybe not, and I think it's maybe even by department or
Sure.
something like that.
No, I hear what you're saying. All right, Judy?
And part of that can actually stem from like budget time. I mean, budget time, they can tell us that we need a new park or we need this and that, and maybe that's where we kind of dig into that. Maybe from the budget is where we kind of get our 6 months goal, actually, and some of that from the managers or police people or whatever we call them. Like that, where they would like to see what would be done in 6 months or so.
Yeah, I think the budget is a good spot, but if I'm hearing what Kevin is, there's a lot of things that are not tied to budget that we could set up. I mean, I think budget is first, but that can be a year later, you know, you do it in November. It's really hard in June and July to, you know, refocus, but that's certain. All right, Sarah?
I was just going to suggest, like, I think some of our staff that are from contract agencies do a really nice job in their presentations. And I think that might, sort of like what Kevin's saying, like, it helps us to make a decision because, you know, but in all fairness, that is their full-time job, right? And everyone who's on a committee or even on this board has, you know, 100 other things going on and gets compensated very little for this. This isn't our full-time job. So we have a lot of questions. I think maybe there's something we can learn from some of the folks that come in and give us really formal, tight presentations seeking recommendation. And they come prepared with like answers to the questions that we're going to have. For example, like the presentations that Town and Country does for us frequently. I think Mike Axon does a great job coming prepared to the meetings, oftentimes prepared with like knowing what some of our questions are and being able to come prepared with, this is how we came to this recommendation and these are the things we ruled out and this is, the data that supports that. I don't know, maybe just something to be learned from those the way things are presented in the meetings.
Okay. Anybody else? Kevin?
Sure, I got a couple more, and
Okay.
in all fairness, I emailed Jason these thoughts the other day. Trustees, and I'm at this too, I think today, the way this meeting went today was wonderful. In part, maybe because some of the topics weren't as meaty as some others have been, but I think good prep by trustees is important. I think if we have a question that can be answered by staff before the meeting, especially one that involves more digging a little deeper, call that staff person. I know I talked to Mike the other day, before last meeting, I talked to Bill, and it took him 15 minutes, and he answered 6 of my 7 questions, and it was like, I didn't have to bring those up in the meeting then. Because oftentimes we bring those little questions up, and they lead to another, and they lead to another, and they lead to another, which almost just happened here. Thanks for bringing it back, Jay, a few minutes ago. Staying on topic is really important, and I think, Jay, today, you've done a great job of that, pulling it back, and I'd say we can continue to do that and not get off in the weeds. That's really important. Let's see, what else do I have here? I guess, yeah, that's it. That's it. I'm not gonna reiterate what Bill said. He took one of my most important ones. We have great staff and committees. Let's trust what they say, and let's know that the public was involved with their process, with their committee too. There's a committee person. Every committee has a board person on it, right? So we should be bringing these things here, representing our committees. This committee talked about this. This is what we decided. You can see it here, but also here's the detail. Here's some of the things you won't get. Give a summary of that. How many times it went to the police commission.
Bill?
So one of the things we agreed to last year when we talked about how we were going to run meetings again was everybody has a shot at of a topic, right? So you go through and you give everyone a shot. What stretches out these meetings is you get this back and forth between a trustee and the group, and it's like let's say I had questions. I would not, if I didn't ask all my questions at once, I would just keep coming back to the well, and that's going to delay the meeting the entire way. If I have questions, I'm going to ask them all at one shot, and then I'll silence my mic, right? But I think everyone needs their opportunity to talk in succession before they get an opportunity to talk again, so people can express their views.
Anybody else? All right, can I just respond to a couple? One, if we want to, Robert's Rules of Order says that everybody can speak twice on a motion. We can hold to that. I think sometimes I worry that it will hurt the discussion. I think it's important to have discussion. We're still small enough, but if the group wants us to apply that order, that rule, that is one, and Bill is correct that everybody gets to speak once and then everybody gets to speak a second time, and then that would end it and it goes to vote. I mean, we can be that strict if the group wants that, but you do lose some of that discussion. Now, it's been brought up a couple times, and I don't like using the word trust when it comes to trusting committees, because if you trust the committee when you vote for it, when you vote against a committee recommendation, does that mean you don't trust the committee? See, it really doesn't have to do with trust. It has to do, you can trust their work product, but really, when it comes to discussion and decision-making, it's not really a trust issue, I don't see, because you're gonna put yourself in a box. If you say we should trust the committees, then there's really no reason for us to even bring up anything for committees, just let them decide. And I don't think that's the way you want to do it. And this is the reason, and I know some people have heard this before, but a committee is appointed, and I appoint people who have an interest or a skill set that I think is valuable for that piece of village government, okay? So they work on that piece. When you get to the board, we're elected officials. Our job is to look at the big picture, take all these pieces and put them together. When I appoint someone to the Public Safety Committee, I don't have an expectation that they keep up on Parks and Recreation or Plan Commission. Their focus is on that committee. When it comes to us, we have to look at it. So it's not a bad thing to question. I do agree we shouldn't have to redo the soup, right? It should come to us with soup. Now, we may not like this item in it, or we may want to add this to it, or we may say we just don't like that soup, right? And people need to be comfortable with that because that's our role. So I think these are good talking points, and if people want to do some of that, but I don't want anybody to feel pressure that if they disagree with what comes out of committee, that they're not trusting the people that did it. These people are working hard, but just remember, they're not seeing the big picture. I don't expect them to see it. They're citizens, and they probably have an opinion on all this, but that's not what we're hearing from the committee. So those are just the two comments I want to make on that. So anything else on this area? Does anybody have an interest of applying that rule of only 2 times of talking?
No.
Okay.
One more comment, whenever, just put me on the list. I have one other comment.
Okay, I'll do Kevin and then Sarah.
Yeah, when we tried to rewrite that chapter or section 2, whatever it was last
Chapter
time,
2, yeah.
I tried to institute, and I definitely support that. I think but Robert's rules, I think, is motion and then 1 round.
No,
No?
I looked it up.
Okay, all right, okay, good. So then it's 2 rounds. I'm all in favor of 1 round that everybody gets heard before anybody else gets a chance to go again. And then another round, and then done, after the motion. I'm totally happy with that. We usually discuss things that are more detailed before we make a motion anyways. And then we get the motion, we get a discussion, a motion, 2 rounds, done.
All right, Sarah, then Michael.
I also agree with that. And I just wanted to throw in there that I think this is also something that if Bill Chang had more of a right-hand assistant or someone that could help answer some of our pre-meeting questions or help prepare things so that Bill does an excellent job, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he's doing the work of like 3 people. So maybe if there was a assistant to the administrator that could help with some of that to make things more concise and answer some questions between meetings and such from trustees and residents, that perhaps could help to continue with having the meetings be concise and having the easy answers to the questions of what was done, how was this recommendation achieved.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
I just had a question with the 2 times around motion. So what does this mean in terms of, when we enter into an agenda item? Does that mean that we're going right into a discussion and discussing it before a motion is made? Or if somebody just jumps right in and makes a motion, then there's only 2 times around and then it's done?
And that's kind of a judgment call on mine. I'm allowed to allow discussion prior to a motion. So like when we had a presentation, you kind of want to get all of your questions answered, right? before you can even decide if you're gonna vote a motion or even make a motion. No, this would be what Kevin is talking about and what I brought up. It's a rule that once a motion is made and second, and we're at the discussion point, then everybody gets to speak once, and then everybody gets to speak a second time, and then you go to vote.
Right. I don't know if I'm in favor of that because a lot of times in that discussion, you think of other ideas, and if you're limited to 2 speaking terms, then you just aren't able to voice those ideas.
I have this down. I don't want to make a decision tonight. I want people to sit on it, but it seems like there are some members that are interested in that. So we will probably put that as a separate item, maybe on a future agenda, but just think about it. That is an option out there. That is how it's done with Robert's rules.
Right. Just because sometimes we get into a discussion where things go back and forth and other ideas are spread and other questions are thought of.
Understood. Yeah. All right. Anything else in this section? All right. The next section is making the agenda. So this one is, and what I forgot to put on there is there are some that are direct because we asked for future agenda items. So some of those will be in there, on there, but that's not in there. But these are basically how an item gets onto the agenda. Now remember, Bill and I, we don't produce a lot of agenda items. They come from, as you can see, from these other areas. So are there any factors that we should consider that's not on there besides, I forgot to put future agenda items that the board has? Sarah?
Oh, one other issue that I just thought might be helpful is, and I don't know how to say this most smoothest, but I guess sometimes I feel like that Jay, I think you work really hard at this position, and I'm very grateful for all the legwork you do. It's obviously you put in a ton of time, and I totally appreciate it. And sometimes I feel like issues are presented almost as though like your role as the president sort of puts forth a suggestion of how we should vote. And I don't think that's the intention, but sometimes I feel like maybe just having a more neutral early discussion on without any of the voting members preluding with their opinion before we get the full picture would really help me, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, I will make a point. You saw that tonight. I will try to go very last. But you are correct. One, I'm a voting member, so my opinion should count. But you are correct that most of the time, because I sit in staff meetings and I have other meetings, that I do probably have a lot more information than other members. And I will try to tone that down a little bit, and I am making it a point that I am going to try to go last, unless it's an item that I've put on the agenda and it needs to be some reason so you know why it's on there. But I will do that in the future. All right, anything else? All right, before Kevin kind of mentioned it, and I forgot to put it in the memo, Chapter 2 is basically the ordinance that how we run meetings. So if you do have time, remember we just passed that a year ago. So, it's fairly new. So if you want to take a look at it, and now we've used it for a year, if there are changes, and that's probably where I'll bring up we'll have just a quick review of Chapter 2, and that's where we can talk about if we want to just hold people to 2 comment sections of each person during discussion. All right, so we are at the last one, which is going to the second and fourth Monday for meetings. Do we want to do a motion first before we go to discussion, or do you want to just discuss it before? Let's just discuss it. Okay, Judy?
Mainly, because I think one of the big hangups from the one meeting that people didn't like it is because the meeting went too long. So my thing is like now it's 8 o'clock, so we've only been here 2 hours. To me, that's not bad at all. So if I don't know what our goal is here. If our goal is just to shorten the meetings, I'm just wondering if there's a time frame that people feel better about, and if it is possible, can we just say by 10 o'clock at night, if we are not done, we're still on 10 and we still have 4 more to go, can we have another meeting 2 weeks from there with, I mean, I don't want to say 2 meetings every month when we might not need it. If we're done by 10 o'clock on a Monday night, I don't want to have another meeting just to have a meeting. I don't want to do that. Because we used to have 2 meetings like that, and then I thought we were doing great, but you're right, sometimes it gets past 10 o'clock. So can we do a curfew? Can we say by 10 o'clock, if we're not done with those agenda items by 10, and we call it, and then 2 weeks from there, then we know that we have to do it again? Can we do something like that or not?
All right, I have Bill.
So I really like that idea, Judy. The other part kind of B of that, or 1A, is Jay, you knew that last month's meeting was going to be a really long meeting. Could we have, in retrospect, right, hindsight, could some of that material go on 2 weeks down the road? So looking at how you post things for a meeting, get the important stuff on the January meeting, and then say, there's just too much stuff on here. We know it's going to be a long meeting. We're going to have another meeting 2 weeks from tonight, because we already know it's going to be a long meeting. And that way everyone's prepared for that. Like Judy said, tonight, we're going to be done before 10 o'clock, and that's very reasonable. So
to answer your question, if we could, if everybody's in favor of what Judy would do, what I would think we would do, our meeting is the 4th Monday. If we have to go over, it would go to the 2nd Monday. So everybody would know that the 2nd Monday could be a meeting, and we would basically cancel it if we didn't need, versus trying to plan it and then people have a conflict. But where Bill and I get tight on this is going back on that, there are a number of those things that could have been pushed to even tonight, but we get pressure because these people can't move forward on their projects. If we don't pass the well thing, that would have affected this, but even those agreements with the town of Barry, those attorneys want to move forward with that. If we wait a month, that's slowing them down 30 days. So we kind of get pressure from some of the people who bring those up to get them moving because there's such a long time span.
Sure.
So we could certainly do it, and I think people would be very comfortable if I said in 2 weeks, we'll talk about it versus 4 or 5 weeks.
Sure. So if I can comment on that?
Yeah.
So, if there's a legal constraint or, we need to make a decision based on grants or whatever else coming down the road, let's get those done, right? If it's internal, like the taser and the non-lethal stuff, could have waited 2 weeks.
Yes, it could.
Right?
Yep.
And that was a long discussion, and it was a good discussion. We needed to have that long discussion, but it certainly could have been 2 weeks later down the road.
Absolutely.
And knowing that had to go on, that's something we could have planned for.
Yep. All right, anybody else? Calvin?
Thanks. And then I see Sarah's hand up.
Okay.
I love the idea, Judy, and I'm supportive of that too, especially, it's not just about time, it's not about the length, it's about how we all feel after that time, and, it's getting long, so, whatever time frame we put on it is, I guess, subjective. It's also about quality experience, right? We want to make sure we're here and we feel useful during that time, whether it's, if I could feel really useful in 6 hours would be great. If I felt like we didn't do anything after 2 hours, well, that's not so good. So, we should strive to make government enjoyable for us and then also for the next folks coming into this. And in 6-hour meetings, it ain't happening. So it's not just about time for us in person. So that's one. And then on two, I like the idea, if, however, we don't get, this developer sneaking in and say, hey, I know you can have that meeting in 2 weeks. Here, how about sliding this one subject? Because that is worse. We've had those where we've been called in on a Thursday, hey, can you make it next Monday for a sit-down 15-minute meeting? And I mean, when we're stuck in COVID and we're all home, it's kind of easy, but when we're all traveling for work and playing whatever else, it's not so fun. So I don't want to have some groups taking advantage of that second meeting if they see that window.
All right, Sarah and then Bill.
Again, I also like Judy's idea, but one other thought that came to mind was sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about like repeal and recreate and ordinance changes and stuff like that. I'm wondering if we want to entertain the idea of having something like that be a quarterly meeting, and then we can put those items to the quarterly like ordinance meeting or something, because we do spend a lot of time on those as well.
Okay. Bill?
So I think one thing that is missing in all this is that we try to anticipate items upcoming to meet deadlines. So for example, an item that we have tonight is developers event, creek crossing, and so we try to anticipate when the annexation's coming in. We try to anticipate when the final plat is coming in. And then we have to organize that or coordinate that with the plan commission meeting because those don't completely align. So we do try to do some anticipation here. I'm not trying, Jay, we're not trying to add more than is absolutely necessary. What I do get concerned about is because of the way that we categorize priority. So some of the items that Bill, you had brought up, tasers, less than lethal, the way that we factor that would be lower on the list. And if we continue to have long discussions on higher priority items and the higher priority items keep coming up, how do you those items, those less priority items keep getting kicked on, so there are things that, if we're gonna go to a similar scheduling where the second meeting is maybe, schedule it in case we need to have it. I'd rather not try to kick things down the line because you may never get to a resolution on a particular item just because it's at the end of the agenda. And so I'd rather, if we anticipate for that month that we have a large agenda, I'd rather reserve the second date and have an agenda instead of tabling the remaining item, because that would be the way to do it, is table the rest of the items on next meeting.
Lori?
I even think if a long meeting, you can feel a little bit better, like if, there's something big coming up at 9, if we could just get up and use the restroom and stretch our legs, and let's take a 5-10 minute break here, and then you can come back and you feel like you have another hour or two in. I think if there could just be a little bit of moving around and waking yourself up a little bit, that would help a lot.
Okay. Anything else? Well, I'm just I think it's important that we put this in perspective. So this is the 23rd month. We've had 23 meetings, regular board meetings since I've been president. We've had 9 special meetings. So we've already out of the 23 about, 2, every 2 we have a special meeting. We've had 9 of them. And then I decided to see where we are. So I looked at Middleton Common Council and how much time they're spending. So I went 6 months. So and of course they meet twice a month, sometimes 3 times. So I totaled up the total time that they were in session to our total time, because there are a couple of months that we had 2. So in January, our meeting was 5 hours and 45 minutes. They had 6 hours and 41 minutes for Middleton. In December, we had 3 hours and 28 minutes. They had 3 hours and 7 minutes. In November, we had 3 hours and 42 minutes. They had 3 hours and 29 minutes. In October, we had 3 hours and 48 minutes, and that was 2 meetings. And they had 3 hours and 21, and they had another meeting, but the minutes weren't there, so I don't know how long that was. So it's 3 hours and 21 minutes plus whatever the other meeting was. In September, our meeting was 4 hours and 17. We had 2 that month. Middleton had 5 hours and 35 minutes worth of hours. In August, we had 4 hours and 8 minutes. They had 4 hours and 51 minutes. So we are, if you look at comparing with Middleton, we're right in the same ballpark. The difference is obviously they meet more than we do. So I am comfortable with, and I think Bill and I guess Kevin hit it on the money when we did special meetings. They were generally just one topic. Maybe what we do is when we know it's going to be a long meeting, we do that second Monday as a meeting, and it's you know a regular agenda, because I hear what Bill's saying is if we bump it down the lower items and at 10 o'clock, you know, we end and it gets deferred, and then another bunch of priorities, it gets, you know what I mean? It could get bumped down there, and that's not fair. So I think we can work this out. So I would ask, we'll just end it, this discussion tonight. We'll keep it at 1 a month. Think about Judy's idea, Bill's thing, or modified. Think about the idea of limiting how many times people can talk. We'll put chapter 2 on the agenda because both of those are covered in chapter 2. So we can modify it if everybody's okay with that. Sound like a plan? All righty. So we will go to setting the 2021 Board of Review meeting.
So it's that time of year again. In the past, the village board has elected to have the board of review meeting immediately before the regular village board meeting. And so for this year, what has been proposed by the assessor is the meeting in April, which is the 26th. Or the meeting in May, which is the 24th. And so this is a 2-hour meeting, as required by state statute. I believe in the past it's gone.
We started like at 4.
Correct. Well,
No, I thought we started at 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 to 7.
But then that's when this was at 7, now this is at 6.
Okay, you really want to start that early, 4 o'clock? I mean, we'll try to keep the board meeting, maybe we move the board meeting to 7, and then we'll try to keep it to a minimum. I don't know, that's what I'm thinking. Starting at 4 o'clock, holy mackerel. I mean, I don't mind, I'm not working, but I'm just thinking there are people who do work. I don't know, what are people feeling? You want to start at 4 or 5?
5.
Okay.
Or you could always have it on a different day completely also.
Yeah, we could do that too, I guess.
No.
Okay.
So-
April 26th?
So April 26th, or what was the May date?
May 24th.
Or May 24th.
I see, get it over.
So I hear a 26, 26, 26. All right, sounds like April 26th, starting at 5 PM, and board will start at 7 PM that day. Does that sound good to everybody?
And I believe we have enough that are trained.
Oh.
So I do have that desk. We need at least 2 people that are trained.
I think I'm still,
Yeah, so am I still eligible?
They did it for 2 years, so when did you do yours?
I think I was the only one that went last year.
Yeah, I did it the year before.
Oh, you went last year? Cool.
So I think I went, last April or May.
Or did you do it when you started?
2019.
I did it after I became president.
So yours would be expiring
That
then.
was 2 years ago.
Well, it hasn't been 2 years, it'll be 2 years in April.
Yeah, you'll be expired.
Depending on.
Unless I took it in May or June, I don't remember when I took it.
Depending on when you do. I'll check the record.
Okay. Let me know and I can take it again if need be. It wasn't that hard.
It was very hard, Jay. What are you talking about?
But we have Bill, check the records, make sure we have Bill and Michael, because then if it's not a pressure thing, I can always do it later. All right, anything else on this, Bill?
That's it.
All right, future agenda items. The only one that has not been referred or brought to this board is the one that Bill brought up last, and that's replacing the police station. Are there any other future agenda items?
I didn't know, Bill, if we had something about working with Mike Axon about the signage consistency.
Yeah, that is on track here. I think we're still waiting for, well, I know that the Park and Rec had taken action on that. Oh, not the policy, but the Hillebrand. We'll bring that up in the future,
Okay.
sign policy, yeah.
Okay,
So, yes,
sorry. I don't know if it's added to what Bill had suggested about the police station, but just public, or a new village hall. So, Bill,
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the same discussion or not, but.
Yeah,
They're separate.
Separate, okay, then I want to put village hall
okay, generally, the police department and village hall are in the same
on.
building.
I agree, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's on the agenda together.
Yeah,
Or,
But it may not, so I think it's good that we have it.
yeah,
Whether we combine them or not is fine, I don't care. It's a good point.
yeah.
yep, all right, very good. All right, do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right, roll call, please.
Trustee Kettlebaiter.
Yes.
Trustee Brochus.
Yes.
Trustee Paul Mikowski.
Yes.
Trustee Thuzius.
Yes.
Trustee Francois.
Yes.
Trustee Zander.
Yes.
President Langfeld.
Yes. We are in closed session, we'll wait for,
Judy to
Yeah, let me also pull Sarah and we have Paul Johnson, our village attorney, with us into a breakout room. So Sarah and Paul, you'll see an invitation from me.
I think all the bars are closed.
So there was a motion by
Kevin?
Kevin and a second by Judy to adjourn the meeting. All in favor at 9:03 p.m. So I wanted just to reflect that for the record here, since I believe you are still on mute when that motion was made. So we are adjourned. Take care, have a good night.
Jason, like, you're working on this, I'm gonna say good job.